A man draws his children Ricky and Lily sitting on the couch when his wife reminds him of the time and the whole family leaves. At the same time, another man is chopping firewood at a rural house, making excuses to his son Henry that he is still acting awkwardly. And later he reminds his wife about dinner time, and the woman, calmly putting down the book, goes to the kitchen. Meanwhile, the family was growing up, watching a movie at the cinema and hugging, not noticing the enthusiastic glances that a young couple sitting in the back row throws at them. At the exit, this couple stops the family. Do they see David Ross? It's just like the real thing. It's so unusual to see him here when everyone knows he's actually flying in the sky. David answers questions and bows out. It's time for them. And the second man, Cliff, at this time reads a prayer before dinner and watches as his wife and son begin to eat. Meanwhile, Ross's family arrives home, and David's wife notices a small van parked behind the house. But her daughter calls out to her, and the woman goes inside, forgetting about the unfamiliar car. David puts the children to bed, kisses them and, wishing sweet dreams, goes to his wife, who is waiting for him with a glass of wine in her hand. They dance and caress each other until the man is suddenly distracted by the call of a scientific device. He kisses his wife one last time and goes to a separate room. A call also comes to Leaf, and he coldly says goodbye to his wife, passing into the next room, where a high-tech chair lies down and dials a code number on the display. So does David. And a second later, both men wake up in the beds of the space station. They meet in the control room and find out that the call came in connection with a small breakdown outside the station, and Cliff, dressed in a spacesuit, goes into outer space, while David watches him on the monitors. After finishing the repairs, Cliff returns to the station. David starts talking about his new home. The partner likes the fact that it is located far from the city, where there is real nature and there is a river and fish in it. True, son Henry and wife Lana do not particularly like privacy, but they will get used to it. The astronauts wish each other a fruitful week and go to their jobs. And later they activate their code cards and go to the bodies of their counterparts on Earth. Cliff goes to his wife's bedroom, and she asks for permission to have a party, because since they arrived, she has been constantly at home. But the husband is very cold about this idea and immediately goes to bed, turning away from his wife. At this time, David, waking up, hears sounds in the living room of his house and, armed with a bat, goes down to the first floor, where 4 people in hippie clothes are waiting for him. David orders them to get out, but the leader of the group orders them to grab the human machine. They are interested in finding out what is in this body, and where his soul really is. The man is grabbed, and the leader, taking a knife, cuts off David's hand. He is disappointed not to see blood inside. It really is made of something incomprehensible. And, ordering an assistant to bring David's family here, he disables him with a hammer blow to the head. The cosmonaut regains consciousness and immediately reactivates the card in order to see how the scum are mocking his family. The wife proves that they are real by showing a cut on her palm. But the bandits have no doubt about it. He blames the woman who allowed such indecency in her house, allowing a non-human to live here and sleep in her bed, and gives the order to kill them all. Bound, David tries to free himself from the fetters, but they are worked on conscientiously, and the man has to watch his family die. Finally, the artificial body of the cosmonaut is burned from the grave, depriving him of the opportunity to return to Earth. Meanwhile, a call rings in Cliff's house, where the man is informed about what happened, and he urgently returns to the station, where he finds David in a terrible state. The partner tries to somehow alleviate the suffering of the man, but he does not want to talk about his grief. Cliff returns home, where Lana reads the terrible news about the murder of the astronaut's family. The husband says that the flight control center ordered to leave David alone. The killers themselves surrender to the police, and now their family is promised protection. Lana is upset by the tragedy, because she knew David's wife and children, and is very sympathetic to him. And Cliff worries that it is impossible to make a new copy of the body now, which means that David is locked up on the station for another 4 years until the end of the mission. Time is passing. The astronauts continue to go about their business. And one day Cliff, arriving on Earth, reads the newspaper reports about the funeral of the Rose family, while David watches the ceremony on the monitor, and then has dinner alone while Cliff and his son go fishing on Earth. But then a call comes to his transponder, and he rushes to run to the house. The system shows problems with the gateway, and Cliff immediately goes to it and sees David locked inside. The man demands to let him in, and when the door opens, David assures him that it was a simple check. Later, Cliff tells Lana about everything and reminds her that if some kind of malfunction happens and the station dies, the end will come for him. And then Lana offers to let David use his communicator so that he can visit the Earth and recover a little. Back at the station, Cliff talks about it and sees his partner's eyes light up. Later, Cliff gives instructions to his wife about the manner of communication with his colleague. I advised Tom to just let him breathe and go to the communicator. And so, David lies down in the bed of his partner and goes into the body of his double. Waking up on Earth, he explores his new body and goes outside, where Lana is already waiting for him. The woman leads him into the forest, showing him her favorite place by a big tree. And there David, seeing a caterpillar, suddenly starts crying like a child, remembering his family. Lana does not know how to react to such manifestations of feelings, and hugs the man, trying to comfort him. When the couple returns to the house, David praises the structure, not noticing how Henry is watching them. Meanwhile, Cliff can't find a place for himself, worrying about how his partner's meeting with his family will go. But David returns to the station and thanks the astronaut for giving him the opportunity to visit Earth. Now Cliff hurries home, and David takes his sketchbook and begins to draw what he saw. Lana is glad to hear from her husband that his colleagues are feeling better, and tells about David's tears, and he is surprised at such an open display of feelings. A little time passes, and one day David shows his partner a drawing of his house. Cliff is delighted with the drawing. He would have liked to hang it in his living room. David is ready to paint a real oil painting if a friend allows him to be downstairs from time to time. Cliff promises to think about it. Later, the couple consults, and although Lana does not really like this idea, she is ready to give David the opportunity to forget a little with the help of her favorite activity. David stays in Cliff's body the next day and is happy to find everything he needs for creativity in the barn. Noticing the book in Lana's hands, he talks about literature, and the woman rejoices at his attention. Cliff doesn't spoil her with conversations, and when music starts playing from the barn, she stops and listens to David's favorite record with pleasure. Time goes by, men are alternately on the ground. David draws and often talks to Lana. One day he offers her to paint, and when the woman takes the brush, he hugs her slightly, but then her son calls out to her, and Lana leaves. Later, Cliff praises the painting while David is on board the station making a pencil drawing of Lana. Returning once again to Earth, David discovers that the oil for diluting paints has run out, and the couple goes to the nearest town. There, a man lures a woman to a bookstore and advises her to buy one of the books. The saleswoman recognizes him and asks sympathetically about the condition of poor David, who has lost his family. A gloomy Cliff David takes Lana out of the store, and she, sitting in the car, puts her hand on his shoulder, trying to show her complicity. Later, David returns to the station and draws Lana again, while her husband, as always, turns away from her in bed. The next day, David shows Lana an almost finished painting, and the woman is delighted to see that he depicted her figure on the porch. And the man puts on a record and invites her to dance. They dance, and he hugs her in a very unfriendly way. Realizing what may follow, the woman leaves, not noticing that Henry is watching them. David catches up with her in the house. He sympathizes with her loneliness, because her husband is cold with her and is not worth it. After all, Cliff needs to know about everything that's going on Earth. And he sees how she looks at him, to which Lana retorts. She's looking at her husband, not David. The cosmonaut returns to the barn and sees the picture ruined by Henry. Later, Lana sees her son running past, finds out that David hit him, and chases the man away. Back home, Cliff listens to this story, but does not understand his wife's outrage. The kid ruined the painting and deserved to be punished. He asks Lana to let David finish the painting, after which he will no longer let his colleague into his house. The wife has to agree. David Cliff, returning to his partner's house, tries to ask his wife for forgiveness, but the woman, taking her son, leaves for the city, leaving the man alone. Tom has no choice but to take up drawing. Meanwhile, Cliff, who remained at the station, notices his partner's albums, begins to look at them, finds a lot of sketches of naked Lana and remembers how he boasted that he always draws from memory. Downstairs, David's alarm goes off and he hurries upstairs. An angry Cliff shows him the drawings, but he does not understand his claims, because it's just a drawing. Cliff rushes into the fray. This is his wife and only his. David asks to understand him, because he lost everything he had. A friend has everything, but his wife is lonely, because Cliff does not pay her any attention, he does not appreciate her and does not love her. Meanwhile, Lana and Henry return home, where Cliff is waiting for them. He destroys the painting in a rage, and then accuses his wife of treason. She makes excuses, because there was nothing between them. And, by the way, she was against this idea, but her husband did as he wanted. And she is really lonely here, because her husband, considering that the double is not him, stopped paying her any attention. So when David hugged her, it seemed to her that her husband had returned. But this is not the case. Only then does Cliff realize that he was wrong, and hugs his wife, asking her for forgiveness. Returning to the station, he runs into David, who asks for permission to visit Earth for the last time and personally apologize to Lana. But Cliff forbids it, reminding her that she is only his. The next day, David shaves his beard and sends a signal to Cliff. The man stays at the station and, after learning about the damage outside, goes into outer space. But when he gets to the place of the alleged accident, he sees that there is no damage. He returns to the airlock, but it doesn't open. Cliff knocks on the door when it finally opens. And when he sees David with his key in his hands, he realizes that something terrible has happened. Cliff rushes to the ground and, waking up in a chair, sees his bloody hands. He runs through the house, shouting his wife's name and seeing terrible footprints on the walls, and, going downstairs, finds a pool of blood in the living room. Falling to the floor, the man screams with grief and horror. Some time later, he returns to the station and sees David, who offers him a chair opposite himself. And the station flies on. A terrible version of the development of cosmonautics, and a vivid confirmation of the truth. Often we bring our enemies into our house ourselves.